Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyerboxingnews.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about a fight that surprised me this weekend. Did not expect what happened. It's the Nonito Donaire versus Toshiaki Nishioka fight. Now, gamblers were taken care of because the hedge of Donaire by KO held. Very risky play. Many of the comments said, hey, Donaire could win this by decision. I'll agree he could have. But the hedge nonetheless held. I thought privately, in fact, I believe I've said it publicly, I thought Nishioka was a live underdog. I privately was expecting Nishioka to win this fight. He didn't, but the hedge held. We can live for another day. But regardless of the betting, I was fundamentally wrong on this fight. Let's talk about a few things. First, Nishioka's strategy. We all know that Nonito Donaire has an explosive left hook. I mentioned it in the pre-fight video. Nonetheless, I was surprised that Nishioka came out, Nishioka's a southpaw, that he came out and kept his right hand pinned to the side of his head. That was disappointing to me. I did not expect that. I was expecting Nishioka to really rely more on angles and to just be able to tuck his head behind his shoulder, knowing that Nonito Donaire needed to hit the side of his head with his left hook. Right? Put another way, if you recall the Alexander Povetkin versus Marco Huck fight, where Povetkin figures out before the fight that Marco Huck with his right hand can only hurt him up top. Right? So Povetkin literally spends much of that fight bending at the waist, keeping his head low, knowing that as long as his head was low, Marco Huck could hit him, but couldn't hurt him. Right? And so, literally, you have Marco Huck so frustrated in that fight that he starts hitting Povetkin on the back of his head illegally. Because Marco Huck understood that Povetkin was denying him the angle at which Huck would be effective. Let me also point out that that was Povetkin's strategy for that fight, because when Povetkin fought Hasim Rahman, he didn't bend at the waist. He didn't have a need to, right? He understood that Huck was limited, and he simply didn't put his head in a position where Huck could throw his best punch. Now here, Nonito Donaire, in my opinion, for the last few fights, has actually regressed a bit. Right? He's in my top 10 pound for pound. But he's not the technician that he was a few fights ago. It seems to me that Donaire has gotten away from boxing technique and is relying on big punches and trying to knock out opponents, right? He's very power punch dependent now. So I thought that Nishioka, who going into this fight was a master at angles, would be more like Pernell Whitaker, right? A lefty going up against a guy with a great left hook. should be able to bend under the hook. If you know that the hook is coming, that the hook is the big punch from an opponent who increasingly is becoming a headhunter, then I thought Nishioka would literally just get low, just have his head behind his shoulder, and just figure out how to duck under Nonito Donaire's left hook. Because understand, if I have my right hand pinned to the side of my head, that deprives me of the opportunity to throw right jabs, right? If I'm so busy, if my top priority is defense, and I'm just pinning the hand here, then that deprives me of use of the hand, right? Keep in mind too, there's a distance element to throwing a left hook, right? Donaire has to be outside to throw it, right? So you would imagine, has to be in a certain range. You would imagine that that right jab would have helped Nishioka keep Donaire too far outside to throw that hook. And you would figure, since Donaire, if he's going to get leverage on that left hook, has to have his left foot out in front of him, you would figure that Nishioka would actually know when the punch is coming just by looking at Donaire's feet, right? So I was expecting him to come in and really be looking down and to have his head tucked, to be throwing a right jab, keeping Donaire frustrated. Have Donaire throw his left hook, not be upright like Fernando Montiel was, but to literally have his head low and moving, so Donaire wouldn't be able to get the leverage on the punch. And if Donaire's left foot is not in front where he can get leverage on the left hook, then you know he can't throw it. Right? Hope I'm not too wonkish here. But the point is, to throw a left hook takes a few things. Right? He has to have that left foot out in front of him. And Nishioka, if he's that concerned about the left hook, rather than give up the element of surprise, rather than literally render his right side ineffective by just pinning his right hand to the side of his head, I thought Nishioka would play it differently. Hit Donaire with jabs, right? Watch Donaire's feet. Know that if Donaire's left foot is not out in front, he can't throw the left hook. Then, of course, have a two-handed attack where Donaire wouldn't know if Nishioka's right's coming or his straight left, which even after the fight, Donaire conceded had power in it. Nishioka instead tried to literally fight the fight from only one side. In other words, he gives away his right hand by just pinning it to the side of his head. In doing that, he severely limited his volume, right? He doesn't even have a stay busy jab going in this fight that would show up on the CompuBox numbers, right? He has nothing to offset Nonito Donaire's volume in the early part of the fight. Nishioka's low volume literally gave up too much of the early part of the fight. Let me also point out too that part of your balance is dependent on your arms, right? If you're running, you'll notice your arms are swinging from side to side. A guy who's relying on angles, who's in the ring and trying to maneuver himself inside, which Nishioka, to his credit, was trying to do for most of the fight, would have better balance if he has the use of both of his arms. You don't want to have one arm pinned to the side of your head as you're trying to maneuver your way inside. That decreases, in my opinion, too severely your agility and your balance. So I thought Nishioka gave away far too much by having his right hand pinned to the side of his head. I would have rather him done what Alexander Povetkin did. Literally, just bend. Bend at the waist. Tuck your head. Right? Throw a jab. Make it so that Donaire, if he's going to land the left hook, has to make it a counter left hook between your jabs. Right? That would, to me, would have been better strategy by Nishioka. Let me talk about Nonito Donaire for a second. And I understand he has a real vibrant fan base, but he's under a different level of scrutiny now. If you're in the top 10 pound for pound, we're going to look at you differently, right? We're going to hold you to a higher standard. Now, I was a little disappointed in Nonito Donaire's approach. In my opinion, Donaire is becoming too much of a Roy Jones type fighter. In other words, he's moving away from his technical skills, and he's now really relying on his legs and some explosive punches. Right? Let me point out that he missed a few punches early in this fight by wide margins. There's a sequence early in this fight where he throws a hook and an uppercut, misses it by wide margins, right? He's just loading up. He wants the spectacular knockout. Now, he's young. He can do that. His legs were certainly better than Nishioka's. But understand that legs are the first to go. The fighters who are really able to age well are the fighters who don't rely on any one physical attribute as much as they rely on their technique, right? I thought it was really noteworthy that Donaire stayed outside and never was able to adjust to Nishioka's strategy of having his right hand pinned to the side of his head. I was expecting Donaire to do a little bit more. Maybe come in, fake left hooks up top, and then hit Nishioka to the body. Sustained body attack, right? Because Nishioka was so confident that Donaire was not going to go to his body that he literally has his hand up shoulder level and higher, right? This isn't Philly Shell. He's not like this. No, he has his hand all the way up here. That should be troubling if you're a Donaire fan. Because you have to ask yourself, how did Nishioka know that Donaire wasn't going to throw that left hook to the body? Right? That should tell you that that left hook with Donaire is just a bit predictable. Right? The fact that Nishioka is able to just come in, defends that left hook, make it to the 9th round where he's ultimately stopped by a straight right hand that is so surprising to him that it hits him flush, tells you that Donaire has gotten away from using his right hand. Right? Let me also say another point. This is a subtle point. Nishioka's actually coming forward the last 3 rounds of the fight. The knockout takes place with Donaire's back up against the ropes. It should tell you something that as Nishioka is fighting this fight basically one-handed, that he's able to come forward on Nonito Donaire. right? How's that happening? Why isn't Donaire able to just set up shop, say, this guy's trying to fight me one-handed, right? Let me pivot. Let me keep the fight in the middle of the ring. Let me throw body punches. Let me work him over that way. Why is Donaire getting walked down? Right? I mean, I'm not saying Nishioka's walking forward like Antonio Margarito, but look at the progression in the fight. Last round. Look at who's backing who up. And look at what Donaire's doing. Donaire's just back throwing bombs. Right? There's no inside game where he sets up shop and says, okay, fine, this guy's going to fight me one-handed. Let me just stick a shoulder in his chest. Let me go to work on his body. Let me make him pay for being one-handed. Donaire really doesn't. Right? The fight makes it into the 9th round. I know Nishioka gets knocked down earlier, but he's lucid before he gets hit with the straight right hand. My point is simply, why wasn't Donaire able to land more right hands? Right? And so, it's a win by Donaire, no question about it. Donaire remains in my top 10, no question about it. I heard Max Kellerman said Donaire's closing the gap between himself and Manny Pacquiao. Longtime viewers of Dwyer Top 10, boxing.blogspot.com know that I've had Donaire ahead of Pacquiao for quite some time. Right? And he remains ahead of Pacquiao, in my eyes, for quite some time. But if we're going to talk about technicians and stuff like that, all I'm saying is, could you imagine the adjustments a Floyd Mayweather or a Sergio Martinez would make if an opponent walked in the ring and just had one hand pinned to the side of their head? Could you imagine what Andre Ward would do to your ribcage if you came in with one hand pinned to the side of your head religiously for several rounds in the fight and you actually tried to come forward on him? Right? I mean, all I'm saying is Donaire needs to look at the film. He needs to look at film of himself 3 years ago. The fighter who is changing things against Vic Darchinyan. Right? The fighter who goes on a roll after that Darchinyan fight and is literally two-handed and too much for most guys. And he needs to compare that Donaire with who he is today. I know fighters want to please fans, but come on now. You know, you can't be so reliant on a left hook that an opponent enters the ring like this and keeps it like this for the entire fight. Anyway, big win by Donaire. I'll just say I was surprised by a lot in this fight. Did not go at all the way I thought it was. Let me also say, and I know fans disagree with me on stoppages, but the opinion needs to be out there so we can have the discussion, differing views. I thought Nishioka's corner did him a disservice. I'm not saying that Nishioka goes on to win this fight. I'm not saying that at all, but I will say this. I thought he had solved Donaire. I thought he had figured out the angles to where he's walking down Donaire and he has Donaire up on the ropes. And I thought Donaire's advantage in terms of his legs had leveled out by the time the end of the fight came. You knew Donaire wasn't going to land an explosive left hook on Nishioka. You knew that. So given that Nishioka had just been knocked down with a straight right hand, gets up, he's badly hurt. I'm not here to say he's not. But when the referee comes over, he actually talks with the ref. He actually nods with the ref. Look at the film. And the referee lets the fight continue. Right? I believe that the corner should have at least allowed their guy, who is a master at 36 years old. He's been in the ring, right? Being hurt is not new to him. He's been in tough fights. In fact, he's even been knocked out before, right? I thought his corner should have at least let him continue a little bit. Because what was Donaire going to do? Throw a left hook to the body? I mean, all I'm saying is Nishioka knows what hit him. It's a straight right hand, right? It would have been fascinating to see what would have happened next, because Donaire is not exactly Joe Frazier in terms of getting inside on a guy. Nishioka has the left hook blocked. What would Donaire have done? As I saw the ending of the fight, I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get the opportunity to see how Donaire was going to try to go about ending it. And, of course, I'll say this, too. You know, Nishioka, numbers-wise, had actually picked up his volume after giving away the early rounds. It was clear Nishioka understood he needed a knockout to win the fight. So he had picked up his volume. Even the sequence where he gets knocked down, you see him have Donaire up on the ropes, and you see him trying to work an angle where he's going to try to throw heavy, straight left hands. Right? If Donaire wasn't able to stop Nishioka in that 9th round, you would have still had 3 more rounds to go. And you may have had a more tired Nonito Donaire. I think Donaire would have won the fight. I think Donaire probably ends it in that 9th round. But this is boxing. What's Nishioka's corner doing throwing in the towel when their guy mentally looks alert? You know, allow him to try to shake out the tingle in his legs the rest of the round. The referee didn't stop it prematurely. Nishioka's corner threw in the towel, in my opinion, a bit prematurely. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com and dwyerboxingnews.com. Thanks for watching.